Welcome back to Deeply Rested. How happy would you be if you could drastically reduce your workload without sacrificing your income? If you're like me and most business owners I know, the answer is very happy. If you love the work you do but wouldn't mind doing it a little less, today's conversation is for you. I'm joined by Joe Sanok, host of the Practice podcast and author of Thursday is the New Friday, How to Work Fewer Hours, Make More Money, and Spend Time Doing What You Want. Joe's book examines how the 4-day work week boosts creativity and productivity, and he lays it all out for us in this interview. Joe and I originally recorded this conversation for my fundraising event, the Rest and Success Code. I love Joe's practical approach to becoming deeply rested, and I hope you love it too. Sit back and enjoy Thursday is the New Friday with Joe Sanok. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Megan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. Joe, welcome.
Oh, Megan, thank you so much for having me.
Joe, you are such a mentor in the therapy space, and the fact that you are modeling what it looks like to have business success while also talking about slowing down and resting, it brings me so much joy, and I am beyond honored to have you here today.
Oh, I am so excited to hang out with you today.
Well, Joe, let's get right down to it. I want to talk about your amazing new book, Thursday is the New Friday. First of all, congratulations. I read it in 2 days. It was phenomenal. Thank you for writing it.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing you read it in 2 days. Even my brother, who I gave it to him like months ago, he just started it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well,
I guess that's classic like little brother,
Totally.
I'm not going to read your book.
I'm going to say our siblings often are not our target audience, right? So they're sort of bored by what we do and what we have to say. I am your target audience and I loved it. So I think that's valuable feedback. Okay, well, Joe, in my work as a business coach, it is very clear to me that the core cause of burnout for most therapists is that they just work too damn much, right? They are hustling, they're stretching themselves super thin, and they're working this outrageous schedule, crazy hours. None of it brings them joy. And I'm wondering, Joe, if you have any ideas about why therapists specifically are so vulnerable to overworking in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we just start with being trained that way. Mm-hmm. You work in a nonprofit and you're stretching those grant dollars and you're happy if you make $40,000 a year, and then you might get a job at CMH and they're counting productivity and billable hours, and then you might work in the courts or college, and everywhere we work, we're just stretched. And then on top of that, you add that most of the work we want to do in the world is good for the world. And so that, starfish story we all heard in grad school, well, there's so many starfish on the beach. And then you throw one in and say, well, it mattered to that one. We hear these things about like social work and social justice, and that work will never end. We will hopefully make a dent in it. We can make an impact. We can stand up against injustice. We can try to help people. But we could kill ourselves working on these issues we care about. So you have people that have really big hearts, that also have very few business skills, that are used to overworking, and you put them in a private practice or business situation, and it feels easier than what it used to be. But you're comparing working all these hours every single week for so little money, and then saying, well, now I'm at least working a bunch of hours and it's my business. It's like, well, I guess it's better than it used to be. And I feel like I'm making an impact on the world. But we just don't have very many mentors or guides to show us how to do it in a way that allows us to make the money, allows us to have a good schedule, and still have that impact that we all want to have in the world.
Yeah. It's all relative, I guess, to your previous levels of suffering. I think that's really helpful perspective. I mean, even if you went straight into private practice from grad school and sort of skipped the agency phase, grad school is a place where we're conditioned to work long hours, work for free, kind of hustle and grind to succeed. That makes a lot of sense to me. And let's zoom out, even let's zoom out beyond the scope of the therapy world and look at our, Western civilization as a whole. You talk in your book about the Protestant work ethic, and this is something that really speaks to me. Tell us, what is the Protestant work ethic and how does it show up in therapy businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we hear this Protestant work ethic in the United States. I mean, if you just think from a genetic standpoint, who left their country in Europe and got on a boat and came to the United States? Oftentimes it was explorers, dreamers, ideas people, maybe people that were rejected by their family, maybe people that life wasn't that great for them. If life was really stable for you in Europe, you probably would stay in Europe. And so I'm talking about the Euro narrative. Of course, people have come from all over the world. But the people that voluntarily chose to come over to the United States, we have a genetic pool of people with ADHD and ideas and are scattered all over the place. And then on top of that, this Protestant work ethic that really emerged actually later in the U.S. story. We think that we've always had this like nose to the grindstone, get things done. Sure, it took a lot to survive in the 1800s, but a lot of that was propaganda to try to get people to work harder for less money. And it was more from a capitalistic, let's get people to work harder for less money, for our benefit, using religion to do that. And so there's all this evidence I talk about in the book of it being used not from a Protestant standpoint, but just from a let's get people to work harder for cheaper dollars, and then use inappropriate use of the Bible to actually push forward these translations that weren't even originally described in the Bible in that way.
Yeah, it was the beginning of the chapter of humanity where we start treating humans like machines.
Absolutely. Yeah, that industrialist era really starts to emerge in the 1800s and early 1900s. And we can look back at that and say, is that something now that we believe? Do we think people are machines? Do we think that we can, set it and forget it? Are people only as good as what they produce? I would say all of us would say, no, we don't agree with that anymore. But yet our businesses tend to reflect that Protestant and that industrialist mindset, that industrialist mindset of people as machines. We see it throughout our public schools. But the reality is, Henry Ford gave us the 40-hour work week in 1926. It's less than 100 years old.
Yeah.
And so this thing that we think is so strong, the 40-hour work week, is pretty darn new.
That is, a mind-blowing perspective, right? That for most of us who are in the prime of our careers right now, we have just grown up believing that the 40-hour work week is the only way to be successful. So to put it in that frame of like, hey, this concept, this frame is only 100 years old, it really shifts everything.
Yeah.
So I'm from the Bible Belt, and, I can definitely speak to how the Protestant work ethic showed up in my life. And the narrative that I internalized was, if you're not working, you're being lazy. And that message goes deep for me. I remember being in junior high and I was in my room watching some TV or reading a book. I don't know. And I just have this memory of my dad walking in. What are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm just chilling out. And he said, you can chill out when you're dead. You can sleep when you're dead. Get up and do something productive. Does that narrative check out for you? Do you find that a lot of people are showing up with that same internalized message?
Yeah, I mean, if you just walk back a couple generations, so think about in 1926 when the 40-hour work week starts to really take off, and our great-grandparents or our great-great-grandparents are coming out of working in the 1800s 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. The 40-hour work week people, to them, would have seemed super lazy.
Yeah.
And so we look in who was raised in 1926. So that, World War II generation is being raised by people that weren't part of that 40-hour work week. So then that baby boomer generation emerges, being raised by that World War II generation as the first children raised with a 40-hour work week mindset. And then we look at Gen Xers and millennials. We're only the second generation being raised by 40-hour work week people. And so then our kids are that next one. And so it's so recent in human history that for us to give much credit to it and say, this is how it has to be, mean, what else do we have that's only 2 generations old that we say this is going to be how we live all of society?
Yeah, forever.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, nothing comes to mind, which is a really powerful point. Yeah,
Well, I think that also like the pandemic has taught us so much about the things that we thought were unshakable that actually were way more shakeable and can transform differently. I mean, think of all the industries that said we could never do online counseling completely. We could never do online financial advice over Zoom. We can't do, telemedicine for my endocrinology appointment. All these industries, you realize, you know what? Given the right incentives, we can make a lot happen really quickly. You even look at how fast restaurants switched over to contactless, being able to order. Within 6 months, you could pay your bill, you could get your order without hardly even talking to somebody. And so, oftentimes we think these things are unshakable. But if we start to ask those questions and look at the history, and then say, well, now what kind of alternatives do we have? That's where some really interesting and new ideas start to emerge.
I mean, it shines a light on the question: who made these rules? I feel like the biggest benefit of being a business owner is that you get to make the rules. You get to create your business and show up in a way that feels really good to you and works for your life and brings you joy. It's the number one benefit of being my own boss is that I'm the boss. No one else is telling me what to do. We're real quick to say I want to be my own boss. But then when we are, it's really hard to actually make CEO level decisions that serve us instead of kind of feeding into the status quo.
Yeah. Right before this interview, I was on another interview and a person said, we started our own business, meaning we get to work 24 hours a day. We just get to choose which 24 hours we work. And it's just such a toxic, unhealthy way of thinking about running our businesses. And I think oftentimes it's that idea that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. And if I slow down, somehow that's going to actually slow my progress. Whereas the neuroscience is showing the exact opposite. That when we slow down, our best ideas emerge, our best sprints emerge. We get things done we wouldn't have been able to have our brains talk about without pulling back a little bit and slowing down.
Yeah. Let's reflect before we move on everything that you've just shared. What's really standing out to me, Joe, is the intersection at which therapists specifically exist in all of these cultural, societal pieces. Right? Therapists are dealing with industrialization. Therapists are dealing with capitalism. Therapists are dealing with the Protestant work ethic or that internalized belief that, my value is based on my productivity and my grit, and resting and taking care of myself is the equivalent of being lazy, which is the worst thing you can possibly be. And then pile on top of that all of the conditioning that comes from graduate school, working in agencies, being a healer in the world. It is no surprise that therapists struggle so profoundly with slowing down and resting. I mean, they're up against a lot of forces.
Yeah, I would even add, also, let's look at the pandemic and the collective trauma we've all gone through. So you've got therapists that are dealing with kids that are, we're in lockdown and at home, and, spouses that are leaving them, and all sorts. They're going through the same things their clients are dealing with. Whereas before the pandemic, that wasn't
in a way
true.
we never have before.
Yeah. I mean, collectively, as just humanity, we're going through a crazy time in human history. And so to say, for me to even have anything extra to give to my clients, like, where's that going to come from? When you've got so much adulting that's difficult during a pandemic. And so I think just stepping back and saying, if we're going to do good quality therapy, like, what does that look like with all of these extra pressures on us that all humans are going through, and then we're the ones that are supposed to guide people? Like, what does that look like to genuinely think about ourselves as being the healthiest, the most innovative, the most creative, the most productive, entering into those therapeutic relationships?
Right. And really starting to think about yourself in two ways, thinking about yourself as the healer, but also as the business owner. Because healing for us as professionals, it comes through both of those paths, putting on both of those hats and making some really fundamental shifts. You talk in the book, Joe, about transforming the very toxic Protestant work ethic into a healthy work ethic. Can you say more about what it means to have a healthy work ethic?
Yeah, I think traditionally the way that we view the weekends really represents how we view all of life. So for most of us, the weekends have been a response or a reaction to the previous week. So you have a long week, you overdrink over the weekend, you have friends over, you sleep in, you're reacting to the week before. You have all this stress, and maybe in a healthy way, maybe in an unhealthy way, your weekend then hopefully helps you feel somewhat okay after a tough week.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being in reaction, we want to be in preparation for the coming week.
Mm-hmm.
And to say the best work that we can do, and the best neuroscience that we know right now is saying when we slow down first, when we make that the priority first, that best prepares us to do the most creative and productive work. And so, sure, that could be a 3-day weekend. It could just be that we enter into our weekends with a different posture where we say, okay, in the past, my weekends haven't really prepared me for this coming week. Like, what's one thing I can add to this coming weekend that's going to add just a little bit more life? Maybe taking some time to read that novel that's been sitting on your nightstand for months that has no business purpose, but if you sat with some green tea on a Saturday morning and gave yourself permission to read a book, you'd feel lit up a little bit.
Right.
Or maybe remove something from your weekend. Have your groceries delivered. I remember a couple months ago here in northern Michigan, it was one of our first snowfalls. I fired up the snowblower. It took me 2 hours to blow my driveway. And I was just like, why am I doing this? Like, I'd rather be hanging with my daughters. For $35, I can have this dude snowplow my driveway and it's just done. And just giving myself permission to say, this winter, I don't want to blow my snow. Now, of course, that's a position of privilege. It's a position where I can choose, but I'm saying, where do I want my energy to go? Now, if I didn't have the money, I would blow my own snow. But I would rather put that energy into my consulting clients, into my big ideas, into my daughters, into my friends. And so just entering into our weekends to say, how do I make this as positive as I can to prep me for doing the work that I need to do in the world in the coming week?
Yeah. Yeah. And for folks listening, like, I want you to take what Joe just said and apply it to your business and your personal life. I think that's where the transformation really becomes exponential when we're asking, who can I get to do this for me? Who can help me with this task? How can I just get this off of my plate entirely? Because I'm super clear on where I want my energy to go right now. And we do at this moment in time in a way that our great grandparents didn't have access to, have the ability to say, I choose to read this novel. I choose to hang out with my kids and watch a movie. And I think there's something about that we need to celebrate and instead of resisting.
Absolutely. And I think that, when we look at our businesses, there is that tendency, especially when you're first starting out, to bootstrap it. Maybe you're not full yet and you're the accountant, you're the person doing marketing, you're doing all those things. But there's a certain tipping point when if you have clients on a waiting list, or if you're even 60% full, doing one more, clinical session is going to pay for 5 hours of someone doing your social media, is going to pay for 5 hours of somebody working on your website, or even just answering the phones. Yeah. And so taking that transition seriously, where sure, maybe you wear a lot of hats at the beginning, and maybe that's part of it where time is an asset for you. But at a certain point, time's no longer an asset. In that same way, where you can just spend it on the business, where you can start to say, I want to buy time. I want to, buy extra hours through the work that I'm doing. That's where you start to build a business instead of just a job for yourself.
That's right. Yeah. And I love this frame of healthy work ethic, and really naming that having a healthy work ethic doesn't mean that I grind it out, doesn't mean that I bootstrap it and do everything myself. It means that I get really clear on what my greatest contribution is in my business and in my personal life. And I prioritize giving my time and attention to those things. And you gave so many great suggestions just now. I get support for everything else that falls outside of that category. That is, to me, what a healthy work ethic looks like. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, if we can start to really, in our businesses or our lives, say, what are the things that only I can do? The things that I love doing. What are the things that are just most draining for me? And there's things that you just choose to do. So there have been certain phases of life where I paid someone to come fold our laundry. Right now, my 7 and 10-year-old girls can help do that. That's important for them to contribute to the family. And as part of that, I put my own laundry away. I fold my own laundry in front of them too. And so we do it all together. So that's something that right now doesn't make sense for me to outsource. But then there's other things that in my personal life I do outsource. And then in the business as well, to say, if I show up for a podcast like this, I can't send Jessica, my director of details, to do this. Like only I can show up for this. But I can have Jess checking my email right now, responding, checking on the finances. I had 2 pre-consulting calls this morning. So she's following up and scheduling with them, making sure the payment went through, their Trello board set up, like all those things so that I can do what I do best. So when I record a podcast, I do a podcast interview, I drop it into the Google Sheet, and then my team takes it from there. But that's because we've set up those systems so that they know, okay, when this is dropped in, then Mitch, my sound engineer, does the audio, and Sam, she does all the show notes. So I can show up and do a bunch of podcasts that only I can do. And then all that back end stuff, I can have someone else do, and it makes it more efficient. And then we can create more content as well.
Such a great example. Thank you for sharing. I want to talk more about slowing down. You've hinted at this a few times in the conversation so far. And I know that this is the point when many therapists get antsy because they think that slowing down means they're going to achieve less. And I know for a fact, Joe, that you and I are not here to keep people small. We believe in all of our colleagues' capacities for tremendous success. And we know that the secret to getting there without burning out is slowing the stuff down. So I would love right now to hear your thoughts about what it really means to slow down as an ambitious business owner.
Yeah, I think there's a few examples that come to mind for me. And first, we have to believe that slowing down has the potential to help us. We're not going to set firm boundaries, what I call hard and soft boundaries around our time and our activities if we don't think it's actually helpful. In the same way, if we don't believe a budget's going to help you save more money or pay off debt or whatever, if you don't believe that to your core, you're probably not going to do a budget very well. And so to just say, when you set boundaries and you slow down, you're just telling your time where you want it to go to do the things you want to do. And so I would start there. We host an event in the summer called Slow Down School, where top practice owners fly into Northern Michigan. We pick them up in a big yellow school bus and go hang out on Lake Michigan for a week. And the first 2 days, we genuinely slow down. I suggest to people, like, turn off your phone unless we're taking pictures. So they then have to make sure that their practice won't fall apart, so they have to set up some of that infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we go for hikes, we bring in massage therapists and yoga teachers, and we skip stones on the beach. And the first day, people are usually super antsy. Like, I'm here with Joe and the team and all these other top people. Like I want to ask Joe all these questions. I want to ask Allison and Whitney all these questions. And all these great badass therapists are here. And it's like, no, we're going to just slow down first. We're going to go for a hike. We're going to talk about non-business things, get to know each other, skip stones, have a drink on the beach. And then on Tuesday morning, every time it happens, it's like their face just peels off and it's just a ray of sunshine. Or they're like, oh my gosh, I slept so well last night and I'm so excited for the salad bar at lunch. And they just kind of rest in that slowing down. But then what happens on Wednesday morning is, by setting those boundaries, you've allowed the pressure to kind of build, where when it's time to sprint, you can go full tilt. These people absolutely kill it in the 2.5 days that we run towards their business because they had set that boundary to let it build. If you just keep checking that email and getting that hit of dopamine when you're looking at Facebook or whatever, it doesn't build up as much. So then, on Wednesday morning, when we show up, people just kill it. I remember Jessica Tapana was someone that came, and she was just chatting with people in the evenings, and she was showing off her website, and she's terrible at technology and self-proclaimed. She said this, and she got super into SEO and just learning how to build SEO, and was showing people, here's what you can do, and here's some different ways to think about it. And at the end of the week, she had been working on her practice all week. The last day, she said to the group, I was just thinking, do you think there's a market for therapists, a therapist teaching other therapists how to do SEO? Would any of you be interested if I was going to launch some sort of side company to do that? And she walked out of Slow Down School with 10 new clients. And now she makes more money off of that SEO business than she does on her group practice.
Yeah, and the inspiration never would have happened if she wouldn't have slowed down.
No. Yeah. Or this guy, Michael Glavin, that I talk about in the book. He was in a mastermind group with me, and he has this amazing couples practice and group practice down in the Chicagoland area, and just serves people and has a very unique approach to couples work. And he talked for a long time about writing a book, and he just hadn't done it. Practice things would show up. In one of our 20-minute sprints, he outlined, I think it was 7 or 8 chapters of his book with all the details, all the bullet points. It just flowed out of him.
Yeah.
And that's what slowing down does. It allows your brain to rest enough so that when you get into that workspace, you can use that neuroscience to get so much more done when you're actually showing up to work.
Yeah. I mean, these examples are so powerful. I know personally, I do my best, most creative work when I'm on a retreat. If it's by myself, if it's with a group of colleagues. And I love it so much. I do it several times a year now because without fail, you get there, you have space, you're resting deeply, and then this just wave of inspiration and creativity will flow out of you in a way that it can't when you are in the weeds and the grind of your day-to-day business. And, I also just have to say, because it won't leave my head, you gave all of these phenomenal examples, but what really stood out to me is, wow, these people must be feeling really inspired by Wednesday if they're excited about a salad bar.
Right.
I'm like, things are really changing. So you will love salad and you will get your next great business idea. I mean, what's not to love about that combination? Okay,
I think just the food side of it. We had one lady who was on the keto diet and stayed in ketosis all week in Slow Down School, and another lady that was vegan and said it was some of the best vegan food she had ever had. And I just thought, if we can have our chef make both of those people happy, like we have arrived.
Yes. That is an impressive feat. I must say, now I want to try the food, but it's getting close to lunchtime. So that's probably
you just have to come to Slow Down School.
Okay, I'm there. Sign me up. Okay. Thank you for that context. I hope everyone listening is now sold that there is science and an art to slowing down, and magical things will happen for you and your business when you first really internalize that mindset shift. I appreciate that you started with that, Joe, that first you have to really believe that slowing down is valuable and worthwhile, and also that you're deserving of slowing down, right? When that Protestant work ethic kicks into gear, can be really hard to feel like it's okay for you to slow down. But once you do and you embrace that practice, good things will happen. I want to talk about a part in the book. You get into a really famous fable about the tortoise and the hare. And I loved this part because I often talk about that fable. And for many years, I have identified myself as a turtle. Like I wear it loud and proud. Like I'm a turtle. I work with turtles. I love being a turtle. But you have a different take on that fable, and it really made me think. Can you share with us now what your take is on the tortoise and the hare story?
Yeah. So the traditional story is that, there's a hare and a tortoise that are going to have a race for some reason. And the
don't worry about why.
Who cares?
Suspend your disbelief.
the night before they were at a bar and made a ridiculous bet, or like, who knows?
Yeah.
So this hare, this rabbit, like takes off, is like right before the finish, gets cocky, decides to take a nap, and then the tortoise is slow and steady, and goes across the finish line and wins. But when you really think about it, the hare just sprinted like crazy, took a nap because his body was saying I'm tired, or her body. And just should have set an alarm. If they had set an alarm for 20 minutes and did the math on how fast the turtle was, like they would have won. Yeah. And so this idea that we just have to work and work day after day and never slow down, the turtle or the tortoise approach, to me sets us up for that hustle culture where you never can give yourself permission to rest or to say that's good enough, or I've worked really hard this week. I'm going to just go dink around all weekend and do whatever I feel like doing. Or maybe I do want to watch a Netflix show for 4 hours on Saturday. Like, who cares? To allow ourselves whatever our bodies feel like it needs, instead of just like that constant, relentless business thinking and doing that often actually comes out of a place of ego, out of a place of not being good enough, or not knowing if we're good enough, or not even knowing the numbers we're searching for. If you don't even know what numbers for you want to hit, whether that's in social media or financial or whatever, how can you ever give yourself permission to pause? Because you never know if you've achieved your goals.
So much wisdom right there. Mic drop.
Boom.
It was, you started telling the story about the tortoise and the hare, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to like what he's about to say. And then I got to the end of it and I was like, wait a minute. Excellent point. I've never thought about it that way. But when I looked at it through my own lens, and then I was like, oh, maybe I am a hare, because I don't think about it in terms of sprints. I think about it. I like to do chunks of deep work.
I think they're like super similar what we're talking about, right? But I like to set aside a chunk of time and say, for 2 hours, I'm going to like knock this out and I'm going to get into a really deep, focused, inspired space and see if I can tap into some creative flow. And what I produce in those chunks of time, it's like, how on earth did I just do all of that in 2 hours? And now I can take the next 2 days and watch whatever trash TV show on Netflix I want to watch. And so you talk about it through the lens of sprinting and slowing down. Say more about what you mean by sprinting.
Yeah. So, one kind of change in the sprint or batching research is that there's actually different sprint types. So oftentimes people may have tried, I did 20-minute sprints and it didn't work for me. In the same way that, if you know your Enneagram type or if you know your, Myers-Briggs, it gives you a different kind of lens to think through. Knowing your sprint type is the same sort of thing. So you even talked about how, you like to time block. You like to have one thing you're working on for a period of time. So there's time block sprinters who say, I'm going to just work on this one task for a couple hours and just kill it. Whereas there's other people that say, I'm going to do some top level tasks. So we're not multitasking. That's a myth. Right. The research is authoritative in that area.
Stop.
You can't
just stop trying.
You can't multitask. But you may say, for 20 minutes, I'm going to work on my finances within the business. For 20 minutes, I'm going to work on a blog post. For 20 minutes, I'm going to work on billable things or progress notes. So it's still things that you have to do. So do you need variety in your sprints, or do you need to have kind of a major chunk of time? So that's one part of it. The other is when you want to do it. So an automated sprinter is someone that sets up every week. They're going to do it at the same time. So for me, I wrote Thursday as the new Friday every Thursday from April 2020 until September of 2020. And so every Thursday was my writing day. I got in a good flow. I just dove right in. Whereas other people like yourself, you said sometimes you like to go away. So that's more of an intensive sprinter. So I'm going to get an Airbnb for 2 nights or go to a friend's house where they're letting me use it, or just locked down in my own house, whatever it is. And you're going to just focus for a couple of days. And within those days, you could be the time block sprinter where you're just going to say, record 26 podcasts, half a year of podcasts. You're going to do a bunch of solo shows for that whole weekend. Or it may be that you're going to do a whole bunch of different things. You're going to task switch where you're going to figure out your social media plan for the year, and then maybe some blog content for the year, and then set up some scheduling for social media. And so when we understand our sprint types, instead of feeling guilty, like, I'm not doing this right, or I don't do it like, Joe does or Megan does, we can say, what works best for me? What's my natural go-to? There's going to be times that maybe you do need to go away for an intensive, but maybe that's not your go-to. Maybe you're more of a time block sprinter. And so just understanding the basics of your sprint type can then help you say, I know naturally that I work best when I do a time block and I do it over and over every week at the same time. So I know that about myself. So that's why every Thursday I was working on the book. It wasn't like I took a writing retreat, because I wasn't going to get as much done in that writing retreat as if I spread it out every week.
I really appreciate this emphasis on identifying your unique type and not comparing yourself to the way other people do their best work, but just really getting clear on how do you do your best work. I wish I would have known about your sprint types years ago. I feel like I was fortunate in that I intuitively fell into a knowing that you do your best, most creative work when you get out of your house and you're in a separate location and you can do something in an intensive chunk. But knowing that there are actually these evidence-based types and you can kind of discover where do you fit, it fast tracks your ability to get into flow and do work in a way that really energizes you. Because let's come back to the rest and success code, right? We're all about helping people avoid burnout. And the fastest way to burnout is to try to do your work and build your business using strategies that are designed for somebody else, right? If you're trying to show up in a way that isn't innate to who you are, you will struggle. But if you can tap in early to who am I, how do I do my best work, and now how can I create systems and boundaries that will allow me to do my best work consistently, there's a really good chance you won't burn out because you'll feel really inspired by the way you're showing up in your business.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on in that area where, as we think about the work we want to do, if you burn out, you're not going to be able to continue to do that at the high level that you really want to.
Which is sad. Yeah, we don't want that.
It's sad. Costs a lot of money. There's a lot of people in the world that need help, and we won't be able to give it to them.
That's right. You have so much. We all have so much good to offer the world. And you were saying this at the beginning of our conversation. When we're doing good in our work, it never ends. There will still be, even if we worked every minute for the rest of our lives, there would still be work left to do when we die. So let's not do it that way. Let's do it in a way that really protects who we are and what we need, so that when we are showing up and doing work in the world, we're doing it from a very inspired and nourishing place.
Yeah.
I want to, we're reaching the end of our conversation, Joe. I feel like you and I could keep this going for hours, but I'm going to keep us on track, and I want to circle back to scheduling, right? Thursday is the new Friday, is all about the condensed work week. Let's talk about how busy therapists can begin taking some small, manageable steps towards shortening their work week. You have any ideas about where can they begin if they're feeling overwhelmed by this concept?
Yeah, I think first, just evaluating how much of your income is based on you showing up. I mean, if when you show up, you get paid, and when your kid is sick or you're on vacation, you don't get paid, that sets you up in a different way than if you have some sort of either passive or different types of income. And so that traditional model of just seeing clients and then just getting paid for it, that's going to be really hard for you to condense your work week, because that just means for you to make the same amount of money, you have to squeeze 5 days worth of clients into 4. And so
not sustainable, especially not for highly sensitive people.
Yeah. So if we first evaluate, are you in that situation where you're only making money if you show up? Okay, that's a job. Great. You gave yourself a job. Now let's build a business. And so what are businesses? They build income that's not always just based on people's time. And so that can be in a lot of different ways. That can be that you're adding clinicians to your practice. So maybe you're not in the office on Friday or Saturday. Maybe you are completely online. Maybe there's a specialty that there's an opportunity to help kids and you personally don't want to work with kids. Are there things like that you can do? Also looking at counseling as kind of the middle of the sandwich. What about people that are 6 months out from wanting counseling, but they want some help now? So if you're doing marriage counseling, say there was a couple 6 months before they needed counseling that said, you know what, is there an e-course? Is there a book? Is there a membership community? Is there a training that you're doing that can help us out as a couple? There's an opportunity there to build something that is another stream of income. And then on the other side of the sandwich, after people are done doing counseling with you or they're stepping down, what are supports to help them continue that success? Is it a retreat for people that have gone through counseling with you? Or maybe it's not just people that did counseling with you, but it's a retreat that you help people in a different way. So thinking through a lens of multiple streams of income is going to start to free up some of your time.
Yeah.
As well, we want to look at how efficient are you actually being? And so a lot of people, they may schedule on the hour and then give themselves 15 minutes between sessions if they end on time, which maybe they're not. Then maybe you should look at that. When I did counseling, I would schedule 3 sessions in a row on the 45 minutes because it was 45 to 50 minutes. So I would have a 3 o'clock, a 3:45, and a 4:30. Then I would take 15 minutes to do progress notes, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, and then jump right back in. So instead of then having all these 15-minute blocks, I'm then saving myself a half hour for every 3 sessions. And so just looking at your own efficiency, maybe for you, that's just too much. You can't do 3 in a row. You can't do 2 in a row. You can't end on time. Okay, well then start billing for 60 minutes. Look at whether or not you should be raising your rates. Look at those terrible insurances that pay $78.12. Evaluate what's working and what's bringing in the money. And then start to say, if I was going to only work 4 days and I wanted to make, say, 20% more next year, what do those numbers even look like? If I wanted to take an extra 2 weeks off next year, what's my average have to be? Some of that basic math, a lot of times therapists haven't even done, to say, I want to take home $100,000. Okay. I know that with my taxes and expenses, I need to bring in $150,000. I want to work 48 weeks a year. I only want to work 4 days a week. I only want to do X number of sessions. Like that's really simple math that if you just run it, you probably need to make at least $150 a session. So then when you're on a $72 insurance panel, that means you've got to make up that money in your private pay. So you need to be charging at least probably $225 for your private pay. So then you can start to say, now I know what I want to make. I know what I want my schedule to be. I know what I need to charge. Now I need to attract those people that can pay what I'm charging. And then that defines all of your marketing, all of your branding, who you bring on to help attract those clients.
I love the combination of emotional strategies and very practical strategic strategies. And nothing bugs me more than business owners who have completely arbitrary metrics in their business, which is what you're getting at, right? You don't actually know what your fee needs to be because you haven't really thought about how much money you need to pay yourself. You're just sort of spaghetti on the wall all the time. And that's exhausting and it will lead to burnout. So coming back to the math, and if you struggle with math, we have conversations this season with Tiffany McLean and Lindsay Bonham, who are helping us make the math part of it way more accessible and digestible. But when you really get into the math, it allows you to disconnect from the emotion and the Protestant work ethic, lazy messages in your head, and the scarcity fear about being poor, and the family of origin stories that are making it hard to make these changes. When you're just sitting with the math, you can kind of let go of the emotional pieces and just look at the data and make a data-informed decision about what you need to do differently in your business. And it's such a powerful exercise. Anytime I've had someone do this exercise or I've done it myself, every time you learn something that is just fact. And there's something really powerful about fact when we're working towards slowing down and minimizing our work week. So I really appreciate that advice. You talk in the book too about taking really small steps towards slowing down and working less. One thing you suggested that I liked a lot, Joe, was like, hey, if moving to a 4-day work week is just not in the cards for you right now, how about ending at 3 p.m. on Friday instead of 5? Or how about getting to the point where you can take one Friday off a month? And I think those tiny steps towards the 4-day work week are going to make this vision a reality for so many people who are stuck in a more black and white way of thinking about it. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, the big shift away from the industrialists is their prescriptive model compared to more of a menu-based model where we try things, we adapt, we're going to give it a whirl and do some experiments. And so even when I left my full-time job at the community college and was going full-time into private practice and doing podcasting, hold on a second, need a sip of water too.
Mm-hmm. We've
been just going. It was like, all right, water break for everyone. Hydrate.
Yeah.
So I decided to do a 4-day work week for a summer to just see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that summer I took Wednesdays off just because that worked better for the family. And so, excuse me. So then, in the fall, I then looked at the data and found that June of 2015 was financially the best month Practice the Practice and mental wellness counseling had to date. July of 2015 was better than June. August was better than July. So I kept doing it. So that data then helped me inform the thing that I wanted. I wanted to keep being able to do a 4-day work week, but I didn't want to do it at the expense of the finances coming into the family.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when we do that, we can take those small steps and say, okay, I'm going to leave at 3:00 on a Friday.
Yeah.
What do I need to do? I used to have a 3:00 and a 4:00 session on Fridays. So I don't want to just give up 2 sessions. Like, how can I make that work? Does that mean that on one of the days I condense them and instead of taking 15-minute breaks between every single session, maybe I try to squeeze an extra session in. Maybe I start to evaluate additional streams of income that aren't just based on me showing up. Maybe I start to add clinicians. So then by doing that, it forces you to have discussions with yourself around what you really want out of your business.
Yeah. I love it. Joe, you have given us so many ideas. I hope that the gears are starting to turn for all of our therapists listening in. And I just want to say, again, if I could just sing more praises for your book, that there are so many ideas and suggestions in the book about how to do this. I read a lot of nonfiction books, and I feel like 90% of them are all theory and very little application. And one thing that I loved about Thursday is the New Friday is I finished it feeling like I had a lot of theory that helped me make sense of the problem and the argument, but I closed it also going, wow, I am now armed to the teeth with ideas and strategies about how I can make this a reality in my life. So if you loved this conversation and you want more, by Thursday is the New Friday. Read it. I think you're going to love it. And Joe, here at the end, I have 2 bonus questions that I ask all of my guests on the Rest and Success Code. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Question number 1, I would love to know, what are your personal red flags that indicate you're edging closer to burnout in your own life?
I would say if I find that I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep a night, for me personally, it's like, what's going on in my life that I'm that busy? Am I taking on too much personally? It's usually more the personal side that's going to lead me to burnout, where I've decided to be over socializing more than maybe what I should do. Cause I'm such an extrovert. Like the other night, I had a friend leave my house at like 11 o'clock. And then I had another friend who had been in Florida for 9 days, and he's a neighbor, and he texted me. He's like, want to have a quick beer? It was like a Tuesday night. I stayed up till like 1:15 or something. like sure, we need to have friends that we can just do that with once in a while. But if I was doing that all the time, it would be like, okay, like stop socializing so much. So I would say sleep is probably one of my biggest red flags.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. That makes a lot of sense. I love that you're an extrovert and you can function on 8. I'm 10. If I'm getting less than 10 hours of sleep, I need to like step away and go, well, what's going on here? Because this ain't working. That's great. Question number 2, Joe, what are your favorite ways to rest?
Oh man, I have so many favorite ways to rest.
Tell me about them.
I mean, I think for me, I love learning new things. So I've been learning the piano. So I've been learning songs from Encanto to impress my 7 and 10-year-old girls.
Nice.
I would say I enjoy volunteering. So I volunteer at a food bank and on my kids' recess duty. I love playing board games with my friends and just having good conversations where we challenge thoughts about the universe and all sorts of ways of thinking and that we were raised. And I love sleeping in so much. Oh my gosh. Like a Saturday or Sunday morning or Friday morning. Well, not Fridays because my kids have to actually get to school. But to just be able to like, I mean, my 7-year-old, she's like a teenager also. We both could sleep until 10:30, 11 on any day. So sleeping in, definitely. That's my love language.
I live for these conversations, and I'm inspired hearing all of the things that you do for rest and how diverse they are. Some involve other people, some involve socializing, some involve sleeping, some involve being with your family. It's really inspiring to hear what you do to take good care of yourself.
I totally forgot also, I do improv every week, and that just like lights me up. I laugh so hard on Wednesday nights. I don't have to do an ab workout on Thursdays. Like, I just love it so much.
Oh, that's perfect. And during the pandemic, did your improv class pivot to Zoom?
We did 2 Zoom performances that we really used that platform. So one of them was we each just picked a random virtual background, and we did a fake newscast. And Lisa, our fearless leader, would say, now we're going to go to Joe, who's, talking with us about what's happening downtown with the raccoons. And then I'd have like a random background and then have to like make up a story about how raccoons intersected with the virtual background I had. So
that's phenomenal.
Fun stuff.
I feel like improv and stand-up comedy were some of the Zoom pivots during the pandemic that I was the most impressed by, that you can take a improv class of 10 people and put it on Zoom. Like that is innovative. And I love that you have this outlet that just makes you laugh. And I can totally see you being a yes-ander.
Oh, I yes and it up.
I love it.
I was getting to Yes and podcast that Second City put out. So if you like improv and you like hearing Thursday is the New Friday, they take a really interesting approach to their podcast. So.
I am going to check that out right after this conversation because I didn't expect you to say that, and I'm really excited about it. All right. Well, Joe, thank you so much for being here. And if you want to learn more from Joe, you can follow him on Instagram at Practice of the Practice. Joe, thank you again for being here, and congratulations on Thursday. It's the New Friday.
Oh, Megan, thank you so much for having me.
If you want to go even deeper into this conversation, be sure to buy a copy of Joe's book, Thursday is the New Friday. And if you're looking to uplevel your business, Joe's team helps with podcast management, social media support, and other consulting services. You can learn more at joesanok.com and practiceofthepractice.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Deeply Rested podcast. I'll talk to you again next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.